we're going to move to Veganuary now. Just to have some little thoughts about that, because it's really interesting. Because I mean, I was talking to Jeremy the Ape, and I'm just going to get rid of a few screens just to see if I can speed my computer up a minute. I was talking to Jeremy the Ape, who was saying that there are quite a lot of people reporting that they went vegan through Veganuary, and so it is that kind of opening up the door type situation, obviously. But from an activist point of view, and when we were talking on the on Danny's stream, there was quite a lot of anger about Veganuary, which is quite interesting, actually. I mean, I was critical, but I mean, there were some people who were pretty kind of angry about it, which was quite interesting. So I've got a few things up that I thought we could just have a quick look. So this is a Sunderland, the Sunderland Echo, how to take part in Veganuary this month. So this is from today, Deborah Fox here. This is today at lunchtime, and of course, you got if you take a closer look at Veganuary, you can get involved in the campaign and tips on how you can start on a plant-based diet. And so you've got this tension, and of course, some of us in the vegan community are more kind of touchy about the difference on the differentiation between plant-based and vegan. Some people think that kind of differentiation should be abolished. Others think it should be more carefully kind of drawn a little bit. What is Veganuary? See, this is where you've got a little bit where it's a bit mixed up. What is Veganuary? Launched in 2014, the non-profit organisation supports businesses and individuals alike in moving to a plant-based diet. And in some senses, I personally, as a vegan activist, would be happier if it was, plant-based month annuary.
Yeah, it doesn't really chime. I mean, I see it, as you said earlier, as a kind of gateway. I think people can start off wanting to consume a plant-based diet, for various reasons. It could be to do with the animals, it could be to do with the environment or their own health, or all three, or whatever. They start off that way, and then once they're kind of on that road, they can be educated about what veganism really is. You see, you've attracted them through Veganuary, and then that's when that's not the end of the educational process for them. That will continue in terms of, and that's kind of, I see it's in the same way as I see in single issue campaigns. There's big debate about single issue campaigns, and are they kind of harmful to the cause of veganism, cause of animal rights, etc., because they focus just on this one thing and kind of ignore the rest. But I see single issue campaigns, if done in the right way, can be used as a hook to get people started on a road where they can be educated to become vegan. I mean, properly vegan, in terms of it being a philosophy of animal liberation. So I see that you can use these things to positive effect. I mean, locally we've been doing loads on Veganuary. We're in the process of door dropping. I think around about 8,000 leaflets about Veganuary, and we're also doing social media advertising focused on Veganuary. And that's with the same idea. If we can get local people to at least start off on a plant-based diet or a plant diet.
But it doesn't worry you that those two ideas, and welcome Tim from VegFest, but doesn't worry you that those two things are conflated, and does it not worry you that the way that Veganuary is set up in the name almost drives people to think of veganism as a diet? No. Or do you think that we in the grassroots are able to correct that somehow?
I think there's a danger in that, but we have a situation really that already exists with Veganuary, that every year it seems to become more and more popular, more and more people are doing Veganuary. In other words, people are, they're not necessarily becoming vegan in terms of, believing in veganism, the philosophy of veganism, but they're switching to a plant diet. So they're making some step. They are making some step along the road. and I think that's something that's already exists. It's got a big momentum, and I think it's better to kind of use that to actually get people to become properly vegan. But at the end of the day, even if someone just adopts a plant-based diet. So I'm not interested in everything else. I'm just adopted a plant-based diet. All right. Well, of course, we want them to be more than that. But even that in itself means that there's less demand for animal products and less demand for animals to be slaughtered and animals to suffer. So even that, although it's not perfect, even that is a positive thing, and and a step in the right direction. And I think it's just you just get people, to kind of take those first steps, and then hopefully they can be educated further. And that's kind of my approach to it. It's going to use what's there already and to try and
so Tim, what would you agree with Ronnie on that? Or I mean, do you think that there's there's any problems with the language used or anything like that?
I absolutely would agree with almost everything Ronnie said. In fact, as I sat there listening to Ronnie, I was thinking, oh, great, Ronnie said almost everything that I sort of turned up to say, because I think everything Ronnie said is really, really important. It's a fabulous opportunity to fill in. I think that's the word I said is, if you see some gaps, which of course there will be, fill in around. And Ronnie, you've obviously been really, really busy doing that. And I think there are some problems with any campaign that becomes so popular. It's a bit like a politician in some respects. It's by nature, there's going to be some compromises. And there will be some moderating of language. There will be maybe some mainstreaming of ideas. I mean, that's kind of part of the process of mainstreaming a very radical idea, which is what we've all wanted to see over 40, 50 years of doing this, is to see this go mainstream. Does it carry the vegan message? Clearly, it's a more plant-based diet, but we have to start somewhere, and for families especially, we're so born into speciesism, so many different reactions to this issue. The idea that we can kind of come together, maybe as a family or as a workplace, we've got a starting place we kind of agree on. If that's a climate change issue, great. If that's a health issue, fabulous. If that's a concern about sustainable food for a growing world population, absolutely brilliant. We know, because we've been doing it a long time, that these are facets of a plant-based diet which are really attractive. We kind of know human nature, a little bit easier to help people persuade themselves to change. So we're tapping into people's existing motivations. Now, we know that animal rights is not, for many, 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 many people, including many, many vegans, it's not even in a vegan thing. We understand that. We know that. That's a big challenge. But I don't think going after Veganuary is going to help that. I think the clever move is to do what Ronnie's saying, is to see all the benefits. And I could sit here for another 10 minutes listing benefits. Like, hey, all the restaurants, all the places going out to eat, they're all busy learning, plant-based meals. Well, that's good. If people go out or have to eat, fast food or something, that's really, really good. These skills are there forever. These are good steps forward. Schools that are perhaps, going plant-based and blah, 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 and, whole bunch of doctors, plant-based health professionals spearheading a whole. These are really, really positive moves in their own right. Whether they're vegan or not, okay, that is an issue that we can address. But it's up to us to take positive steps and share and promote and debate, seek learning outcomes, and avoid these very punitive, puritanical.
Well, my own take on all of this is that I agree with this proposition that if people come into the movement, there's a way of coming in various ways. I do understand also that the research suggests that they have to be engaged with the ethics fairly early on, And then those who embrace the ethics the most are the ones who are more likely to stay. And so there is a kind of process by which, and so Jeremy was saying, Jeremy the ape, who is at the sanctuary today, so not available, was saying that the Veganuary emails have got a lot more ethics in it than what you see in terms of the public view of it. And so perhaps there was a kind of tactical thing that was kind of, well, we'll not foreground that, but it'll be there, but they'll get it in the end, type of thing. And so it seems to me that Veganuary could be part of the process in which vegans are created, but Veganuary itself is not veganism. And so it's a question of then, how do we kind of, if you like, facilitate the process? And, my interest there would be to see what role the grassroots could play in being a bit of a corrective, if you like, to the corporate side of things. And then to address the other part that you mentioned about the environment, this was an early, right when we started.
Yes.
Do you think there's a problem that some people want to take Veganuary and make it into an environmentalist thing rather than about the animals? And I do notice that I had a quick look. In fact, I can probably put this up. I had a quick look at the Veganuary thing. I mentioned on Facebook that took my eye, the Nestle thing. But there's a lot. This is the Veganuary Twitter feed, and there's a lot that is kind of really focused on the environment at the moment.
Yeah.
Like this one, protect the planet with your plate. If you can see that.
Yeah.
Well, even the Vegan Society have been very focused on the environment just recently, because obviously with COP26, they've got this Plate Up to the Planet campaign, which is very environmentally focused.
Isn't that a dilution then?
Well, just taken on its own, yes, it is. But it's a question of where that can lead people.
Yes.
You see, now for instance, like our local vegan group, and once again, talking about how you move people on. You see, for instance, like on the Veganuary leaflets that we kind of that we deliver, we've got the contact details of our local group. We've got our Facebook page. Facebook details, for instance. If people go on that, they'll very quickly find out about that we're an animal liberationist group, and they'll find out about that we believe that veganism is a philosophy of animal liberation. If people follow up on those details, and it's the same with our social media advertising. If people look at our when they look at the ad, they can then go to our Facebook page, and they'll very quickly learn that that veganism isn't just a diet, through doing that. So people can, but by localizing, the Veganuary effort, for instance, people, that's a good way of taking people kind of further along that road. And I think, people can adopt a vegan diet for environmental concerns. And then once they've kind of got into that, then they can learn about other aspects, and then they can become genuinely vegan. In other words, they can become animal liberationists through that. And that has happened. There's been a lot of cases of people starting off along the environmental road and then becoming, ending up going down the animal liberation road because of what they've learned.
Yeah, I understand all that, and it's interesting to me, all that, and to kind of marry a couple of things together with the talk with TikTok is that one of the main things that people seem very confused about on TikTok is when we explain to them that veganism is a philosophy and it's about animal liberation, and there's a lot of pushback from the public, and they say no, it's a diet, and they're just attuned to the fact that they're used to this idea that veganism is presented as a diet. And okay, we might be saying, okay, well, that's the first step along some road, right? But even journalists are a little bit like that. And that's what would concern me as an ex kind of press officer, is the fact that you get journalists who are completely confused about veganism. And half the time it's because they've read what other journalists have said, and they've read what the movement is saying, and they're talking about veganism itself as a diet. I mean, the kind of counter to that is, Tim, before you came on, you said that presumably that's the participants signing up for Veganuary, right? So, and then the other challenge for me would be to say, this is a challenge to my position, would be to say, okay, well, if you don't think there's enough ethics in Veganuary and the way it's presented in the claims making, what would you change? Because presumably that's where the kind of trade-off would be. If you make it very ethical in terms of initial presentation, then presumably the theory is that you're not going to attract as many people as Veganuary attracts, because they think they're going onto a diet. And then you've got the New Year's resolution. So I think it's a complex issue, but I'm not quite sure that there's enough ethics to satisfy me. But if there was a kind of ethics that would satisfy me, that means presumably there'll be half as many people signing up.
That's the key point, Roger. That is the danger, and unfortunately that does happen. And I think it's really important to remember too that there's a lot of conflict over this. You know, people reject the animal rights position. We tend to think that, oh, well, you know, all we've got to do is educate people, and people will come round. And, you know, when people understand that actually animals are not ours, and well, they have a right not to be used, it all makes sense. But actually, no, a lot of people will think that through, and they will reject it. And I said, well, no, I disagree with you. Right? I don't agree with your animal rights position. I don't think it's correct. I reject it. And when people do that, Veganuary can really, you know, these other reasons are very important, because we have a climate change emergency. And although for us, animal rights is our core, you know, there are other things going on in the world, and we do need to address those too. And Veganuary does address those issues. And what I would say with Veganuary is dollar for dollar, value for money for campaigns. I mean, compare Veganuary with Go Vegan World. The Veganuary spends £500,000 a year. Last time I looked, for full-time staff of 7, and they estimate last year they did 500,000 people, of which 40% stayed vegan, and another 50% changed their diet. 85% of people changed their lifestyle as a result of doing Veganuary last year. It was about 400,000 people changed their lifestyle, and approximately somewhere around about 150, 200,000 people saying they've gone vegan. Now, compare that with Go Vegan World. Spend £2 million a year on billboard advertising. There's no figures over 6 years there's no any evidence or even any surveys that have been done as to whether there's an effective message or not. Now, of course, we love the message of Go Vegan World. It's a pure abolitionist message. It's really well thought out. They're beautiful, striking. We all support it. But it's £2 million a year. It bypasses the grassroots. It goes into the hands of Rupert Murdoch and the media companies. And there's no evidence that it comes anywhere near those sort of figures. And therefore very unlikely that it does. So unfortunately, Roger, you may have a point that if we go down that route that we want to see, you know, we may find that we just don't come anywhere close to the sort of numbers that we need to see. And we are talking numbers game. Ronnie Lee, you know this. We have a climate emergency, and sometimes I think that, you know, animal rights, vegan activists forget that. You know, we're like, oh, you know, yeah, right. Come on, Veganuary, come on. Do you see anything anywhere that is making a difference like Veganuary? How dare you sit there, any of you, and diss the biggest single motivating animal rights plant-based campaign there is on such a tiny budget. What I would say is, if you're moaning about Veganuary, shut up, do something positive, take a leaf out of our man Ronnie Lee's book here, fill in the gaps where you see so to be, and let's get this over the line and stop moaning.
In the climate crisis is very, very much an animal liberation issue, because who does it affect the most? It's not humans, it's other animals. Other animals are already dying their billions because of global heating. You know, and no matter how much that's going to affect humans, no matter how much that is already affecting humans, it affects other animals on a massively greater scale. So combating the climate crisis is the number of animals that die because of adverse human impact on the environment, including what we do to the climate, it probably closely approaches the number of that suffer and are slaughtered because of the food industry. It's a huge area that for far too long has been ignored by the animal liberation movement. So the climate crisis is very much an animal liberation issue, and we need to get on board with fighting it, and we need to make alliances with people that aren't necessarily fighting it for the same reason as us. They may be much more.
It's always been a vegan issue, though, Ronnie, isn't it?
I think it's always been a vegan issue in that certainly the early vegans, a lot of concern in the early days about the environment from vegans. But I think that kind of, as veganism kind of tended to become more commercialized, that sort of disappeared. And it's coming to the fore again, in more recent years, where there's, this.
Yeah, but then you've got another tension. Again. There's another tension here, and that goes back to what Tim said, which is when veganism becomes mainstream, some of the values start to get kind of faded out a little bit, and so you've got that tension as well, haven't you? I'm not decrying all that.
No,
it's kind of a process that you've got to go through as a movement, right?
Veganism is veganism. Veganism is a philosophy of animal liberation. That's what it is. That's what it's always been. It's people's interpretation of veganism. It's people, thinking that it's something that it's not. That's the kind of problem. And I see Veganuary. I don't see Veganuary as something that's trying to persuade people to go vegan. I see Veganuary as something that's trying to persuade people to adopt a vegan diet, which is something different. But it's a first step. Somebody adopting a vegan diet can be a first step.
Well, wouldn't you think that the organisers would say that it's the first step towards veganism? So it is about creating vegans, presumably.
It's about creating vegans. A person doesn't become a vegan just because they consume a vegan diet. A person becomes vegan when they accept the philosophy of animal liberation. That's when they become vegan. But somebody that adopts a vegan diet for whatever reason will then get exposed to other things, because then they begin to look at other things, begin to see other things, and those people then may become animal liberationists. And that's, and those of us that are animal liberationists, we can assist in that process.